She never expected warmth to return to her home on a quiet evening when everything felt cold, but that was exactly what happened the night her husband's uncle stepped through the doorway. For weeks, she had moved through the house like someone trying not to disturb the shadows. She felt them everywhere, between conversations, under the silence, inside her heart. And yet, when Uncle Darian arrived with his gentle smile and kind eyes, something shifted, like a window finally cracking open after being shut for far too long. She noticed it the moment she handed him a cup of tea. His gratitude wasn't rushed or polite. It felt real, warm, present. She wasn't used to presents anymore. Her husband, Colbin, had become distant ever since work had swallowed him whole. She understood the stress, the deadlines, the exhaustion, but understanding didn't stop loneliness from stretching across the evenings like an unwanted blanket. She missed him, even when he stood right beside her. Uncle Darian, older and calm, felt like a reminder of the days when kindness filled their walls without effort. He had always been a steady figure in the family, but she hadn't seen him in more than 2 years. His arrival felt unexpected and strangely comforting. "You've done a beautiful job with this place," he had said, admiring the softly lit living room. She smiled, almost shyly. "I try." And she did try, every day, every moment, to hold the home together, even when her heart felt heavier than she cared to admit. As they talked, she became aware of how easily he listened. He asked her about small things, her garden, her painting hobby, the new curtains she had chosen, and he showed patience, genuine curiosity, as if those little details mattered. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be heard like that. Colbin joined them later, tired and quiet. The two men exchanged a warm hug, and truly, she was glad to see her husband soften, even slightly. Still, she sensed an unspoken tension beneath his fatigue, something he wasn't ready to share. Throughout the evening, Uncle Darian filled the home with light conversations and gentle humor, the kind that didn't demand anything from anyone, the kind that allowed a person to breathe. She loved watching how he brought ease back into their living room, ease that had been missing for far too long. At one point, while clearing the table, she caught Uncle Darian watching her with a thoughtful expression, not intrusive, not pitying, just thoughtful. "You look like someone carrying more than she says," he remarked softly. Her hands paused on a dish. "I suppose everyone carries something." "True," he replied, "but not everyone should carry it alone." Something about those words settled deep inside her. She didn't respond right away. She didn't know how. Later that night, as she walked down the hallway to bring fresh blankets to the guest room, she overheard Uncle Darian's voice from the living room. He wasn't speaking loudly, but his tone carried weight. "Colbin," he said gently, "she misses you." Her breath caught. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words pinned her in place. There was a long pause before her husband answered, his voice low, strained, almost breaking. "I know," he whispered. I don't know how to fix it." A quiet ache rose in her chest. She wanted to step into the room, to tell him she didn't need perfection, only closeness. But her feet felt rooted to the floor. Uncle Darian responded in that calm, steady way of his. "Then start with honesty. Start with something small, but start." She closed her eyes. Maybe this visit was meant to bring something back she thought she'd lost. Maybe warmth could return after all. Near the end of the hallway, she whispered the blankets against her chest, trying to steady her heartbeat, and she wondered what the next few days might bring. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. She reached the guest room door and placed her hand on the handle, unaware that something far deeper was already beginning to shift inside her home. Would the coming days heal them, or expose the cracks they had been avoiding. The next morning arrived gently, with sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor like soft ribbons. She stood barefoot near the stove, stirring warm oats while the quiet hum of the house settled around her. It felt different today, lighter somehow, as if a single night of shared company had nudged the silence aside. She heard footsteps before she saw him. Uncle Darian entered with a polite smile and a nod of thanks when she set a cup of tea in front of him. He carried an ease that reminded her of calm mornings long before life became tangled with worry. "You're up early," she said softly. "I've always loved morning light," he replied. "It tells the truth, even when people don't." His words rested in the air. She wasn't sure what truth he saw today, but she felt seen, in a gentle way, not an uncomfortable one. When Colbin joined them, he looked better rested, though a quiet weight still clung to his posture. She watched him sit beside his uncle, rubbing a hand over his expression, as if trying to wipe away lingering thoughts. "Thank you," he murmured. She nodded. Routine kindness had become her language, even when words failed. The three of them talked through the meal, mostly about simple things: weather, a neighbor renovating their porch, an old story from Colbin's childhood. But beneath it all, she sensed something shifting between the two men, a silent conversation unfolding in glances and half-smiles. After breakfast, Colbin left for work, promising to be home early, though she wasn't sure if he truly could be. As the door closed behind him, Uncle Darian turned to her with a gentleness that made her shoulders loosen. "Walk with me?" he asked. She hesitated only a moment before agreeing. The air outside carried a crisp chill, enough to bring a faint color to her cheeks. They walked along the garden path she had tended mostly alone, where the flowers grew even when hearts didn't. "You're thoughtful," he observed, as she paused to remove a small leaf from a blooming petal. "I'm just invested in the things I can nurture," she answered quietly. "You're good at it," he said, "but even nurturers need care." Her breath caught a little. No one had said something like that to her in a long time. They continued slowly, the way people walk when the conversation matters more than the destination. "I hope you don't mind me being direct," he began, stopping near the hydrangea bush. "But Colbin is struggling more than he lets on." She swallowed. "I know he's tired." "It's more than that," Uncle Darian said. "He feels like he's failing you, and he doesn't know how to admit it." Her heart tightened. She had never wanted him to feel that way. She had only wanted companionship, connection, something to hold on to before the quiet swallowed them both. "I just miss him," she whispered. "I miss who we were." "That's not gone," he assured her gently. "But he needs a hand reaching toward him, not waiting for him. And you need a chance to speak your own truth without fearing it will burden him." She felt emotion rise, tender, fragile, and uncertain. "I don't want to be another weight on him." "You're not a weight," he said. "You're the reason he keeps trying." His voice carried sincerity, and she felt something warm pulse beneath her ribs. As they turned back toward the house, she thought about his words, about the possibility of rebuilding something she thought was slipping away. But she also noticed the way he looked at the home, as if assessing the quiet corners she had grown accustomed to. It made her wonder what else he could see, what she had perhaps ignored. By afternoon, she found herself in the kitchen again, chopping vegetables while the sun lowered gently outside. She felt more aware of everything: the ticking clock, the fading light, the subtle shift in her own breath. When the front door opened earlier than usual, she looked up with surprise. Colbin stood there, face softened by a resolve she hadn't seen in months. "I came home early," he said, quietly. She dried her hands, unsure what this moment would hold. Something about his expression made her heart tremble, hopeful, unsure, maybe even afraid. Before she could speak, he took a small step toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" he asked. And just like that, the air changed again, charged, fragile, and full of possibility. She wiped her hands on a towel, her heartbeat fluttering like something unsure of its own rhythm. Colbin stood in the doorway with that hesitant expression she hadn't seen in so long, an expression that suggested he wanted to be close, but wasn't certain he knew how anymore. "Of course," she said softly. He nodded and followed her into the living room. The late afternoon light warmed the space, brushing the furniture with a gentle, golden glow. She sat on the end of the sofa, and he settled a little distance away, elbows on his knees, fingers tightening and loosening like he was trying to find the right words. "I'm sorry," he began. Her breath paused. She had imagined those words 1,000 times, but hearing them now felt different, more vulnerable, more real. "You've been patient with me in ways I didn't deserve," he continued quietly. "I've been so overwhelmed with everything, and instead of turning toward you, I shut down. I didn't want you to see how much I was struggling." She listened, her chest tightening with a slow ache. She didn't interrupt, even when emotion rose in her throat. She wanted him to finish, wanted him to let it all out. "It wasn't fair to you," he said, voice unsteady. "You've been holding this home together while I've been somewhere else entirely, and I know you felt alone." She swallowed gently. "I have," she admitted, "but I never stopped wanting us." His eyes softened with regret and something like relief. "I want us too," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to come back from the distance I created." Those words touched a part of her that had felt cold for too long. Still, uncertainty lingered in the quiet. Before she could gather her thoughts to respond, Uncle Darian stepped quietly into the room, pausing when he sensed the heaviness in the air. "I'm interrupting, aren't I?" he asked gently. "No," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. Colbin offered a small, appreciative smile. "You're not. Actually, you've helped more than you know." Uncle Darian nodded, his expression warm but slightly cautious. Sometimes all people need is a moment of courage. He turned to leave them again, but she caught something in his eyes, an awareness, maybe even a careful hope. It was almost as if he wished them the closeness they were trying to rebuild. After he left the room, she returned her gaze to her husband. "I don't need everything fixed overnight," she said softly. "I just need effort. I need honesty, and I need us to be on the same side again." "We can be," he answered. "I want to try, truly." Hearing that eased something deep inside her chest. For the first time in months, she felt the faint spark of possibility, like the beginning of healing rather than another cycle of silence. They talked for a long while, not in rushed promises, but in gentle truths. He spoke about work pressure, the constant deadlines, his fear of not being enough. She shared her loneliness, her desire for partnership, and her longing for simple moments of presence. Their conversation was tender, almost delicate, as though they were rediscovering each other with careful hands. Later, when evening settled across the living room, Uncle Darian returned with a quiet smile. "How are you two holding up?" he asked. Colbin exhaled slowly, like a man untangling a knot inside his chest. "Better, thanks to you." Darian waved off the gratitude. "I didn't do anything. Sometimes families just need a pause to hear themselves." She watched the two men, noticing how similar their gentle expressions were. For a moment, the weight in the house truly felt lighter. But as the night deepened, she couldn't ignore a small, unexpected warmth forming when her eyes drifted toward Uncle Darian. Not romantic, not dangerous, just grateful. Deeply, quietly grateful. He had stepped into their home at exactly the right time, bringing a calm strength they desperately needed. Still, gratitude could be powerful, and powerful emotions, even gentle ones, sometimes shifted the ground beneath a person's feet. Before bedtime, as she passed by the guest room, she noticed Uncle Darian standing near the window, looking out with a pensive expression. When he sensed her presence, he turned with a soft smile. "You're stronger than you realize," he said. His words settled somewhere tender inside her. She nodded, unsure of what to say in return. But as she walked back toward her room, one quiet thought lingered in her mind. What if this warmth, this support he brought, was only temporary? And what would happen when he left? The next few days unfolded with a softness she hadn't felt in far too long. It wasn't perfect, real healing never was, but there was a gentle rhythm growing between her and Colbin, like two people slowly remembering the melody they once shared. In the mornings, he lingered a little longer at the breakfast table. In the evenings, he asked about her day with genuine interest, not hurried habit. Small things, tiny gestures, but they mattered. They reminded her that connection could be rebuilt one quiet moment at a time. And always, in the background, Uncle Darian moved through the house with steady kindness, never intruding, always supporting. He had a way of noticing details others overlooked, when she grew tired, when Colbin seemed tense, when the silence needed a soft word instead of an explanation. One afternoon, she prepared tea in the kitchen while the men talked in the living room. Their voices drifted through the doorway, low, steady, thoughtful. She could tell by their tones that they were building trust, something long overdue. As she carried the tray into the room, she caught the tail end of their conversation. "You're doing better," Uncle Darian was saying, "not because everything is fixed, but because you're trying." Colbin exhaled in a way that suggested he'd been holding his breath for months. "I don't want to lose her," he murmured. Her steps faltered just slightly. He meant the words. She could feel it. When she entered, the two men looked up with warm smiles. She set the tray on the table, trying not to show how deeply the moment touched her. But she sensed something else, too. Darian's quiet relief, as though he wanted nothing more than for their home to feel whole again. As the hours passed, she and Darian found small moments to talk while Colbin made a few work calls. None of their conversations were heavy. They were simply honest, gentle truths shared between two people who understood the weight of carrying unspoken things. "You seem brighter," he said, as they stepped onto the porch later that evening, the sky washed in soft shades of rose and lavender. "I feel lighter," she admitted, for the first time in a while. He nodded, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. Sometimes a home just needs someone to remind it how to breathe again. She smiled at that. "I think you brought some of that breath with you." His gaze softened. There was gratitude there, maybe even a quiet affection, but never anything inappropriate. Only the warm appreciation shared between two hearts linked by care, not desire. Still, she couldn't deny that his presence had filled an empty space in the home, a space created not by romance, but by the absence of emotional comfort. And comfort could be powerful, sometimes confusing, sometimes bittersweet. As the last of the sunset faded, Uncle Darian turned toward her with a thoughtful look. "I'll need to head back home soon," he said gently. The words struck her more deeply than she expected. She had known, of course, but knowing and feeling were rarely the same. "So soon?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've already stayed longer than planned," he offered a kind smile. "But I think you two are finding your way, and that's the most important thing." She nodded, though something in her chest tightened. She wasn't ready to lose the warmth he brought. Not yet. Not when the house felt newly alive. That night, at dinner, the atmosphere was warm and almost joyful. They laughed more easily, spoke more openly. Even Colbin's shoulders had relaxed in a way she hadn't seen since the early days of their marriage. But later, when she and Colbin prepared for bed, a quiet truth settled in her mind. The moment Darian left, their home would be their responsibility alone again. Was their new connection strong enough to stand on its own? As she turned off the lamp, a single thought kept circling inside her heart. What if his departure tested everything they had just begun to rebuild? And second, would their home still feel warm without him? The morning of Uncle Darian's departure arrived far sooner than she wished. She woke early, moving through the quiet house with a softness she couldn't shake. The air felt different today, still warm, but touched by that tender ache that comes before a goodbye. She brewed tea and set the cups on the table, listening to the familiar morning quiet. When she heard his footsteps approaching, she turned with a small smile that she hoped hid the heaviness settling inside her. "Good morning," he greeted gently. "Good morning," she replied, handing him his cup. He accepted it with a nod of thanks, then took a seat at the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence carried its own understanding. Soon after, Colbin joined them, and the three of them shared breakfast the way families should. Easy conversation, small smiles, honest warmth. Yet beneath the comfort lay a quiet awareness that this was their last morning together. When breakfast ended, Darian stood and brushed his palms together. "I should finish packing." She walked him to the guest room, helping fold the last of his things, even though he insisted he could manage alone. It felt important to be there, to show, without saying it, how grateful she was for everything he had brought back into their lives. "You've taken wonderful care of this home," he said softly, slipping a neatly folded shirt into his bag. She lowered her gaze. "It didn't feel like enough, not for a long while." "It was more than enough," he replied. "But sometimes the caretaker forgets she deserves care too." His words tugged at something deep inside her. She looked toward the door where sunshine spilled faintly across the hallway. "I guess I just lost my way a bit," she admitted. "We both did." "You found your way back," he said. "That's what matters." When they returned to the living room, she felt Colbin's hand slip gently into hers. The gesture surprised her. It wasn't forced, not hesitant, just warm, steady, present. "I want to thank you," Colbin said to his uncle. "You helped us more than you know." Darian smiled, resting a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "You did the work. I was just a reminder." She felt her throat tighten. A reminder. That was exactly what he had been. A reminder of how love should feel, how homes should breathe, how hearts should stay connected instead of drifting apart. When the moment came to walk him to the door, she felt an unexpected swell of emotion rising. Not sadness alone, something more complex. Gratitude, hope, and maybe a quiet fear of losing the balance they had finally found. As Darian lifted his travel bag, he paused before stepping outside. "Take care of each other," he said, looking from her to Colbin with that steady, reassuring calm she had come to depend on. "We will," she whispered. He offered one last warm smile, then stepped out into the crisp air. The door closed softly behind him. For a long moment, she stood there in the silence. The home felt different immediately. Still warm, but emptier without the calm presence that had filled its corners. She felt the weight of his absence settle slowly across her shoulders. Colbin must have sensed it, because he wrapped an arm around her in a gesture far more natural than any in recent months. "We're going to be okay," he murmured. "I promise." She leaned into him, allowing herself to feel the comfort she had missed for so long. "I want us to be," she whispered. "We will be," he said again, with quiet certainty. She believed him, maybe not fully yet, but enough to let her heart hope. Later that evening, as she stood by the window watching the sun lower behind the rooftops, she felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. Their home was quieter now, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a place beginning again, slowly, tenderly, with room for growth. Still, as the last light faded, one thought settled softly inside her. Now that the warmth had returned, would they be strong enough to keep it alive on their own?